What's it like working with teams from different regions?
When you say teams, you just mean like production teams or
No,
professional teams?
Game teams.
Game teams.
Management, players, owners.
I think the expectations, and this comes mostly from culture. It's not even about gaming. Well, maybe a little bit gaming culture plus overall culture. But for instance, it's well known that in Asia in general, you listen to your elders or you listen to your superiors. So when you show up to a broadcast and they tell you, be there, you might complain all you want, but you'll be there. Like you will come and whine all you want while you're on stage doing rehearsal, but you're there. Whereas a lot of regions in the West, we're comfortable just speaking of being like, I'm not going to be there because that's against my priority and I'm here to play to win, which is also understandable. Like I get it. You want to win. There's a lot on the line. And that's where the conflict of interest is it's a little hard to resolve. Because I'll admit it, as a production person at the end of the day, you just want a fun show. You want a show that people get excited about. And that's why so many people like the underdog story. It's exciting. It really, really stinks for the favorites. But hey, someone's got to win. And if it creates more drama for the underdog to have an upset, sometimes that's preferable from a production side. But obviously you can't wish for that because these are people's lives on the line. I'm not just toying. It's not like a reality show where it's all scripted and, everyone's getting paid their, broadcast fees. It's not that. You're here because this is your career and I can't mess with that. So I'm not going to go to an extent where it affects, your performance because you have a duty to your fans as a gamer that you have to perform, as a player that you have to do your best and you have to show what you've practiced. But again, that's where the tiny, tiny sacrifices have to be made. And the cultural part just makes it really difficult because one, there's language barriers. And two, there's that expectancy. Like when I was at OGN, the biggest thing was when Western teams would come for any game, they just wouldn't be used to the strict regimen in terms of time because they're not used to being on linear TV. And so when the refs start yelling at them saying you have to finish your setup in the next 30 seconds, they're like, well, that's just not going to happen because I have to warm up and I have to check my drivers. And to them, it's like, well, that's great, but you're going on air and you're playing your match. And then there's a language barrier and you see this gap of that's not what I'm used to. At the end of the day, again, they both work towards it because they know that OGN means best. They've seen OGN's broadcasts. OGN also doesn't want to, OGN will find a way to make sure you're playing at your best at the end of it. But a lot of that conflict happens. It's a little difficult, but I think not as difficult as some other things that I've faced just because we all know at the end of the day, we want a good show. And a good show means good performance from the players and, really, really tight production. So sacrifices are made, you work around it a little bit, and you find ways, especially from production, to adapt on the fly, right? I mean, whether it's creating a new segment during a live broadcast, whether it's tossing a video that you just didn't think you were going to play, you find ways to go through this and make sure that it doesn't affect the viewing experience. And sometimes it does, and those are the parts that we need to work on for sure.
You've been in the League of Legends competitive scene for a long time. How have you seen it evolve, and where do you think it's going?
Well, it definitely evolved. We went from circuit points to LCS and regular leagues all around different regions. It all stems from that, I think. That had a rippling effect in terms of infrastructure and global competition and how people see it, fandom. In some ways, it's funny to me because personally, I had no problem being emotionally invested in the old format of circuits and just global tournaments. But I've talked to a lot of people, and I get it logically that the regular season and it being localized has allowed them to have a bit more investment because you get to pick a team. It's like sports, where you get to pick a team. The only difference is currently it's not regional, but you can still have that investment of I like their YouTube videos, so I will like so-and-so team. I saw that when I was in Korea. Korea takes the storytelling in a very different manner, but again, the goal is the same. It's that you drive that story every week. You see certain players play every week, and then you get to build. And there are organic stories that develop, and you just have to notice them and pick them out. But I think that's helped a lot, is that the storytelling has been much more developed, and I think that's a result of both things. One, being regular leagues, and two, it being globalized, is that now you have to care because you have to figure out how your kid on the street in Taipei is going to care about FlyQuest, right? You have to figure out that connection, and you have to drive that home. You have to have that material ready. Whereas before, the stories were the obvious ones of, oh my gosh, TSM is going to play Moscow 5. Are they going to win? Moscow 5 has beaten every Korean team they've ever played. Like, how does this work? Their records are so different when compared to Korean teams who are currently the best. But when they play, can they win? It's the obvious like statistical stories and the very larger region-based, like NA versus EU, and Riot cater to that with bringing back things like the Battle of the Atlantic. All Stars now tries to cater to that, with different regions. And that was the only story back then. It was very exciting. I had no problem with it. But now there's different tiers, and I think they're still developing. I think what's needed, and I think it is a direction that every organizer, Riot or whether it's other broadcasters in other regions, are trying to do, is now how do you make every tier of that storytelling matter? Right now, the regional part is definitely a little bit weaker in terms of intensity compared to the global part, and it just shows. But it's hard to beat that because in any game or any competition, the World Championship is going to matter the most because there's the most on the line. It doesn't matter about, prize money and everything matters, but the title is the biggest. Everyone remembers the World Champion. You could have never watched a game of League of Legends and you say, oh, like SKT won again, like they're going to be the World Champions again. And you know that because it's on the headlines of every news outlet and every mainstream media, and it's covered. It's the same with, the World Cup. You may never watch soccer, but suddenly you'll tune in or you'll hear about it. You'll hear like, oh, they won in the finals. And the World Championship matters, and you don't have to reach that same part because then the World Championship isn't special anymore. Obviously, you want to keep it separate, but I think right now, the storytelling's it's been getting better for sure. Because initially you had no base because you came from not regular leagues to regular leagues, so you said what matters other than TSM and COG used to be rivals. Now we have players like switching teams, and there's roster swaps, and everyone gets excited about roster swaps every offseason. Yeah, I swear it's like the favorite part of a huge chunk of the League of Legends community is the roster swaps during offseason. But banking on those stories, and there's some really good ones this year, of course, with players like playing against ex-teammates and imports now going all the way back, and new imports trying to come in with different teams, and everyone trying to figure out can they make it work. But I think there's still, and this isn't just about League of Legends, but in esports in general, what we tend to do, and it's just human beings in general, but we tend to take what works and overdo it. We tend to just beat it right into a pulp and until we realize nothing's left. And I think a good example is analyst desks in esports overall. A couple people introduced it, and now every single tournament in the world has a 3 to 4 person analyst desk. You always go back to it every game, and you always discuss it. Now, different people, use the content a little differently, whether it's deep dive, whether it's now using telestrators or other cool little tools like AR. But at the core of it, it's the same. And again, nothing wrong with that. But what I mean to say is we've gotten in this habit of, storytelling. How do we do it? Okay, gaming is negative to a lot of people's eyes. We're gonna really get that story out there. We're gonna say, oh man, this player, their parents didn't want them to become a professional gamer, and now they've overcome it. Now they come to every match. They come to the World Championship. Again, really cool story until you hear it for the 50th time. And it's nobody's fault because it's the most apparent story. And it is, when you're there talking to the person, like I'm a victim of this, is that if I'm the interviewer, even if I've heard it for the 50th time, if they suddenly tell me with tears in their eyes, I haven't talked to my parents for 2 years, I'm going to cry. Like, I'm going to like that story.
It's like when you go to a band, watch them in concert. Everyone wants to hear the one song.
Yeah.
So just give them the song.
Yeah, that's what it is. But I think there's more to figuring out the other tiny intricacies of these players' lives or their competition that matters. And you see a lot of different content, whether it's from Riot or the teams themselves that are trying to capitalize on this now of team house environments or conflicts, internal conflicts, external conflicts. And I think it's the human touch, is that the number of people or the percentage of people I think that you'll get that care or that watch because of gameplay will always have a cap. And this hit me real hard when I was in Korea. I was playing solo queue in Korea late at night, like 2 a.m. When everybody plays, right? Everyone's online at 2 a.m. And we're playing, and someone in the chat was making fun of like a mid lane pick on our team. And they were like, oh, are you just copying Faker because he played it today? I don't remember what the champion was. And legitimately, that player said, who's Faker? And I was just like, how do you not know when it's plastered on your front page, on your landing page in the client, when you've watched these matches, when it's on all these communities, there's all these photos. But you say
he's
that.
Pushing buttons. I think he was pushing buttons.
You say that, but then there's other people who are like, I didn't know there was a match today. And that's when it hit me where they're like, I know who Faker is, but I didn't know when he played. I might know when the World Championship final is, but I could care less about his weekly matches, right? I mean, he's great. That's cool. But I think it's the people who accept, like, I'm never going to be as good, so why care? Why watch? And again, that's where that hard cap comes in. And it's the same with sports, right? I mean, I don't watch the NBA because I'm like, I could be like LeBron if only I practice. Like, no, I never think that. I mean, I did when I was in like 4th grade, but then it hit me real hard that that was never going to happen. But I watch because, I mean, I do think the game itself, the sport itself is cool. But 2, there's stories where there's players that you like, whether it's, Steph Curry's kind of evil smirk. I mean, that gets people going. They're like, I want to see what he does next. I want to see how he turns out as a player, regardless of skill, because he's good. Plus, he's got this characteristic of how does that develop? How does that affect his team later or his future career? And that's what you care about. And that's what everyone talks about. People talk about achievements, but only if there's a story behind it. You talk about people, legendary players like Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, only not because they have the most trophies, but because that has a story. Whether it's followed up, whether it's how they had a slump afterwards, whether it's they had a comeback, whether it's, the flu game for Michael Jordan. There's something tied to it that more people outside of basketball, golf, football could care about. And I think that's what we're missing. We're starting to tap into it. I don't think anyone has quite figured out the formula, but there's something there. There's something there that we can tie those two communities together.